Hello and welcome. I know we've been dealing with a bit of technical difficulties in the first 30 minutes of trying to get this up and running. You know how it is. We're clearly sharing bandwidth. But basically back to this evening. This evening I wanted to talk to you about policing and mental health. I'm hoping you're hearing me loud and clear. I wanted to talk to you about this subject because we have heard on many different accounts the experience of police officers who are currently working in the force. And with last year being 2020 and this year seeing the new year with 2021, I wanted to really open this year with some feedback from an ex-police officer who I've been privileged to have met, Adrian Ashby. So thank you, Adrian Ashby, for joining me this evening.
Not a problem. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
No problem. The reasons why Adrian and I got talking was we met on another networking group, and we really got to understand his experience as a police officer. I think it's fair to say that as an ex-police officer, it gives him the right and the privilege to talk about his experience in the police force, but also to look at other things with regards to mental health and how he, in his progression through the police force, has experienced how prepared he was as a police officer working in communities whereby he will find himself out on calls that was not of a police matter, but more of needing the client, the call was related to other needs. So Adrian describes it being everything for everybody. And Adrian, please elaborate on that. First of all, let us know who you are and what brings you, tell us the beginning of your story with regards to your background and how you came to be in the police force today.
Well, yeah, again, thanks for having me on your broadcast this evening. My career in the police started off the back of working for the Department of Health and Social Security. I started there pretty much after leaving school, and my first official job, full-time job, was as a fraud investigator for the DWP, which is Department of Work and Pensions as it's now known. The job entailed me to look at fraudulent benefit claims, income support, job seekers allowance, and disability allowance. Basically, all types of fraud that occur when people try to cheat the system. So I did that for about 3.5 years, and then an opportunity came up for me to join what is now known as the National Crime Agency, which contains Interpol, Europol, West African crime, anything to do with crime. There is a department there to assist and to investigate such crimes. So I transgressed into that role, and I spent about 4 years there working on the economic crime unit, looking at suspicious transactions, money laundering, banking fraud, tax evasion, and all of those sorts of things. And that was going very well for a couple of years. And then things changed for me on a personal note. To be quite honest with you, I needed more money. And my best friend said to me, look, you've been doing this type of work for a while. Why don't you join the police? And straight away, although I had been for almost 8 years, heavily involved in a police environment, the thought of actually being a police officer myself was, not something that I'd ever dreamt or thought that I would ever do, for a number of reasons, particularly my ethnicity. As you can appreciate, here in England, just like I guess everywhere else, we don't have good relations as persons of colour with authority and the police. So there's a great distrust for the police, and it's just not something that you do. But you know, speaking to my friend, he said, look, you know, you're getting older. You need to put that to one side and do it for you. And also, we had something here which was more of a recruitment drive where all the various police forces were looking for minority ethnics, as they now say, to join. You know, as opposed to ethnic minorities, to join the force to be more inclusive and representative of, you know, basically who we are.
Right.
And it was right at that precise moment when they were looking for people like myself. So you know, I sort of mulled it over and spoke to a few people. What do you think? What do you think? Because again, there's a lot of peer pressure on you as well. You know, people think, oh, you're a police officer now. Well, I don't want to, you know, be your friend anymore, and that sort of thing. So I had to overcome all of those hurdles. But nevertheless, I went out, got the application, and this was a conversation we were having earlier. I applied to the Met because at that time I lived in London, and Metropolitan Police control the whole of London.
Right.
Put my application in, and they said they were far too busy. They had enough people and they weren't recruiting. However, the lady I spoke to on the phone said to me, if you really want to do it, try the City of London Police, which police this square mile of London, the financial district of London,
Yeah.
London,
Wow.
or try the British Transport Police. So I said, well, what's the difference? And she said, well, to be quite honest with you, other than the name, and obviously you're still in London, you know, there's no difference. The money is the same.
Right.
So I said, oh, okay. So I applied for City of London and British Transport Police. And within about 2 weeks, the British Transport Police application came back, you know, sort of saying, yeah, we like what we hear in your background and stuff. Can you come for an interview? Went for the interview, passed the interview, and then you go on to the medical stage, because obviously you have to pass, you know, make sure that you're physically fit to do the job. Drug testing and all sorts of things take place. And once you go through that elaborate process, which takes about 8 or 9 months, you get your final acceptance letter, and then you go on to the training process, which lasts for, in my case, it was 3 months at that time.
Right.
We go away from home, and you bitches, you know, like training camp, basically like a boot camp. So you're there all week, and you go home at the weekends, and that's what I did. So that's basically how I got into the police, and that was back in 2004.
Right. Right. So here we have a young man looking to join the police force. You applied for some of the top positions, the City of London Police Force. Okay, so firstly, for everybody that's listening, Adrian is based in the UK, and we have been talking so far about his career development to becoming a police officer. And in a climate whereby race relations with the police force wasn't at its best, they felt that their recruitment drive was important, and so they did that, and after much consideration, or after much asking people's opinion, what they thought, making that transition, you know, you eventually decided to join the police force.
Yeah.
Now, in that training, often we hear that when it comes to mental health and the police force, there is a very grey area with regards to who is supposed to be called out to what jobs and how you find yourself as police officer. I've heard it many times before, how police officers have found themselves addressing a call that is really not within their remit in their position. Can you elaborate what kind of training you went through during your induction into the police force? Because naturally, time and time again, we hear that we need to improve in the way policing is done. And so being a police officer yourself and having been in the industry, tell us, who have never walked that walk, what that must be like when you're in training and you come out the other end and you are now in serving the public, you have a badge, you're representing the police force. How did you find yourself having to deal with the day-to-day calls, and what is the experience you've had with regards to mental health and policing?
Well, let's start at the beginning. Doing the training, first of all, your training is broken up into theory and practical. So you can imagine a lot of it is bookwork, studying the various different laws, trying to understand what offences, relate to what laws and how it all gels together. Then you go into the, if you will, the classroom side of it, or the fitness side of it, where you go and put that into practice. So you're given scenarios to do. You're, briefed, right? Officer A is going to be the subject, and you're going to be the officer, and they're given instructions to make your life difficult, and it's to try to get the best out of you, for you to develop yourself and hone your skills. Obviously these are controlled environments, so there are safe words that you can use and safe zones that nothing's going to happen to you. Going back briefly to the bookwork, in particular on mental health, the most that I was given was what we call Section 136 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, which is what governs the way that we police, or often referred to as PACE. You're told about the 136. You understand that 136 is the Mental Health Act, and you're to, if you come across somebody with mental health, you use your discretion to apply that act. So jumping forward from there, and that's literally what we were given. We were told loosely about schizophrenia, which and remember, I'm talking about 2004.
Right.
Almost 20 years ago now. In particular, schizophrenia, we didn't have the different variants of bipolar or EUPD, all the different, OCD, all the different categories we now know, which are household labels that we can all physically mouth off. We weren't told about that, in particular, schizophrenia, for the simple reason, in my mind now, all these years later, somebody who is schizophrenic is more likely to be violent and aggressive towards you. So your remit is obviously to keep yourself safe and keep members of the public safe.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah.
Right. So, cut long story short, you now pass your training and you now go out onto the beat, as it were. And something you said earlier about how you interact with the public, whereby you're attending particular calls where mental health is at the front of the situation.
Right.
9 out of 10 times, if not 10 out of 10 times, it's going to be Joe Public who calls the police and says there is a man or a woman who's acting weirdly or suspiciously. I'll give you an example. It's one that I had quite a lot. Naked man walking down the street.
Right.
So to Joe Public, you open your front door and you go around the corner and there's a grown man walking down the street naked. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Clearly something is not right with this man. He has mental health, whatever.
Sure.
That member of public doesn't think to themselves, oh, let me look and see if there is a mental health organization or facility nearby that I can call to help this man. You don't think like that. Call the police.
Right.
because the police are seen as the end all or be all. Okay, so it's kind of like reverse roles. The public are putting that situation in your lap. Now, from the police side of things, when you turn up, you can't not do anything. You have to do something. Okay,
Yeah,
and this is where you start to learn. So you turn up, there is a man walking down the street, muttering to himself, acting erratically. Your first primary concern is the duty of care to the rest of the public. So,
right.
You can start going down the roads of indecent exposure and, all this type of stuff. That once you get there and you realize you try to make contact with the person, try to stop them, ask them, what's the problem? What's your name? Where are you coming from? Are you okay? Are you hurt? But, if the person is not coherent and they're muttering and they're being evasive with you, very, 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 very quickly, you realize, this person is suffering with mental health.
Right.
Now, you don't know what degree of mental health, because 9 out of 10 times you've never met this individual. You don't know who this is. So, what your training then kicks in, and then, first thing you're thinking, right, okay, this person definitely needs help. The one thing that they teach us is a police station, and this is always important to remember, is not a place of safety.
Right.
Okay, it's a place of detention. Okay,
See,
so
mm-hmm.
yeah, so go on.
So just to you describe something that sounds perfect.
Mm.
You see a man, you see a person, male or female, in the street, the extreme ends of mental health, as in he's naked or he's muttering voices. Sometimes it's not so explicit as that. Sometimes it's just someone's hovering outside. The call is someone's acting suspicious outside my door.
Yes.
Or on my street.
Yes, it could be. But
not everybody's like that. Not every police, we know.
Yes, yeah, of course. I was using that as an extreme.
Okay, let's carry on.
Situation so that you can kind of get to the gist.
Yeah, but not every police officer's like you is going to make that assessment. Like they'll, it could be a different scenario.
This is the thing. Everybody has their own thought process, but as we all know, the police are supposed to be, impartial. So therefore, when you arrive at a situation and you see that, first and foremost, public safety, your colleagues' safety, and then what are we going to do with this individual?
Right.
So you've already determined that this individual needs help. Safe to say, we're not doctors, safe to say that this person is suffering with a degree of mental health. Police station is not a place of safety. So the best place for this person is a hospital. Right. Okay. Now, once you've made that assessment in your mind with your colleague who's trained like you and is thinking like you, and I'll get to that in a moment, you'll understand why I'm saying that.
Right.
You then think to yourself, right, okay, 136.
Right.
Okay. Which now means that we're now going to invoke that Act, Police and Criminal Evidence Act, Mental Health Act on this individual. Right. So you'll, say to the person, look, we're going to take you to a hospital, nearest hospital where practicable, and we're going to get you the help, and you try to be as softly and as nice, as you can be with the person. You've got to remember as well, if the person is naked, how do you convey that person in the back of your patrol car? You've got to call for a van, you've got to be like, again, because now you're attracting an audience. People, oh my God, look, there's a man naked and stuff. For whatever reasons, a lot of the times I've dealt with situations like this, they were outside schools. So, you then have to think, now you have young children, looking through the gates, wondering what's going on. So you really got to act professionally. You get your van, the van comes, you put the person in the back of the van, you radio through, you're going to the nearest designated hospital, depending on where you are. You get there, you speak to reception, and you say to them, you know, we've got a gentleman here, we found him wandering the streets, butt naked. We believe he's got mental health issues. There you go. This is where it gets sticky. The hospital staff now turn around and say, okay, that's fine, we'll admit the person, but we're busy at the moment, you can't leave.
Right.
Because now the hospital don't know who this person is. They've got to do their assessment, okay? They're running around doing all the other things that happen on a daily basis in a hospital. So you're now required to keep this person under control, if I can use that word, or keep the person compliant before they can be seen by a doctor or a nurse.
That's 2 hours though. Good, that's a good 6 hours though now.
Yeah, well, again, now this is where it gets sticky, because you're now in the hospital, you're sitting there, you're keeping this person restrained. If the person is generally compliant, you'll tend not to put the cuffs on them because that can agitate them. However, if they're showing signs of aggression and so on and so forth, you'll have to then, you know, put the cuffs on this person. So you're required to stay with the person until the doctors come out and give you the all clear and say, okay, you guys are free to go. You come back to the police station, you make your report, and you carry on with the rest of your day. It's as simple as that and as black and white as that.
But it ain't.
But it ain't. Now, what tends to happen, and this is where the politics of it kicks in. The 136 is used a lot of the time, and this is more of a political thing within the police. It's all like a big game, okay? I am fully aware of officers who have detained people, okay? And they will take them to the hospital, and they're quite happy to sit there all day with the person. And the reason they're quite happy to sit there all day is because if you're sitting in the hospital all day, being flirtatious with the nurses and stuff, and they're pouring cups of tea down your throat all day, why would you want to be out on the street, you know, doing the job of a police officer, you know, jumping over walls and chasing suspects, when it's nice and easy sitting in a nice warm hospital? You're not out walking the beat in the rain. You see what I mean? So people use it to their advantage. On the flip side of that, like I say, radio goes off, gentleman walking down the street naked, can you assist? You go there, you've got your sergeant on the phone to you. What's happening? What's happening? Yeah, 136 Sarge, we're going to take him to the hospital. The sergeant's job is to man the team, as it were.
Right.
He's got problems coming at him all day long. He's got the inspector on him, the chief inspector's on the inspector, and so on and so forth. There's a shortage of officers, depending on what's happening. Like, say, you know, London, if you've got the Lord Mayor show on, central London, that means all hands to the pump, officers on foot patrol, crowd control.
Right.
They can't spare you to be sitting in the hospital for 6 hours. So you get into a political argument, yeah? Because...
Okay.
Yeah, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, so just pause 1 minute. So hold on a minute. Being from the medical practitioner standpoint, and who have worked in forensic mental health being a person has committed a crime, they are sectioned under the Mental Health Act, they might have been stealing fags or cigarettes in that regard. And let's be clear, just for translation, when the UK call something fags, we're talking about cigarettes.
Cigarettes, okay? Yes.
Just to make that clear, because I know that could be translation, can get lost in translation.
Yeah,
so someone's got into a sweet shop and stole something. Yes. Suddenly that person is being called in. It is a 136. They have been, but they're being sectioned under the Mental Health Act. They're also being held under the Mental Health Act that can indefinitely keep them in a secure imprisonment situation a lot longer than the actual crime itself. So the danger with the section 136 can play two ways. It could be how you described it in the beginning, there to support the individual, get them the assistance that they need. The problem is the resources. The second thing is, here's a gentleman, 136, look, we can't spare you, come into the police station. And I'm going to say it out loud, as in, my concern is we're going into someone that has been held in a police station who shouldn't be there. And that person is now presenting concerns. And that process, when someone is held and detained in a police cell with mental health, calls for medical assistance to come to the police station. And that process is a very different process because it is heavy-handed. It is about controlling behaviour for the safety of the police officers and the public good. That is even without even having an assessment. And that is the danger. And unfortunately, you know, for many, that often has been a detriment to people's livelihood, well-being, because from there you are sectioned, you are kept overnight, 72 hours, full week of assessments, and then you are also being medicated to control your mood, behavior. And once you're medicated, your whole persona and personality totally changes. Now, what you described sounded wonderful in the beginning. What I know is that the resources is the question. The fundamental question. My work in the UK was about working with social services to ensure that healthcare practice and partnerships were aligned to ensure that if the needs of the society or the needs of the community is that they need mental health services, where is the tier 1 services and where is the intervention? That birthed the MST, the multi-systemic therapy, which is emergency crisis outreach support for instances, but they often are used for families because that is where also the need is. So policing end up standing very much as a nucleus on their own, having to deal with that. And then we step in as tier 2 healthcare providers in response to someone who has been detained or in response to someone who's been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. That is a different process because you haven't gone from community support, you haven't got services without medication, you've jumped tier 3 and tier 4. Tier 3 is where we medicate and tier 4 is where we detain, whether it be on a hospital ward or be in a prison under the Mental Health Act. This is screaming a concern for me. And time again, we know that within the Black community, this is often an issue, but more so is prevalent around young children who have mild disability, especially autism. So let's get straight to it.
Okay. Again, the trouble with it is for the officer in question, you're dictated to by your radio. So, you know, you will go in the morning, you'll have a briefing. Oh, you know, somebody stole a car last night, or this happened last night. Be on the lookout for a missing person. You can imagine, we've all seen films. You know, it's all the same kind of setup when you have your briefing in the morning. Once you go out on the street and your radio says to you, there's now a situation down the road, can you assist? You'll say yes. You could be on your own, you could go with your colleague. You'll get there and you'll find yourself very quickly embroiled in a situation where you have to be physical with somebody, and somebody saying, oh, he needs to be arrested, he just stole this from the shop, or he just damaged this building, or whatever it is that the person has done. Mental health at that point is not at the front of your mind, okay? Because you've now, in that split second, you can identify that an offence has taken place, criminal offence which warrants this person being arrested. So you tend to arrest the person, okay, convey them to the police station. Once they get there, the sergeant will go through the, the ins and outs, and ask the person, are you on any medication? Do you suffer with mental health or anything like that? The person, depending on where they're at in their own personal life, might, quite often admit, yes, I suffer with mental health. Sergeant will then tick another box. Okay, are you on any medication for that? Yes, no, whatever. How long have you suffered with it? And it is quite an intensive interrogation, if I can use that word. And that's just booking in process. Now, I was quite fortunate where I worked, and I think it's the same for all police officers anywhere you work. If you work there long enough, you'll start to get a rapport with your locals, so you know who's who. But there is, a great deal of times that you come across people that you don't know. So you don't know what their backgrounds are. But when you attend the scene, one, you're protecting whoever it is who's called you. You're protecting yourself, and you're trying to protect the person even that you're arresting, because you don't want any harm to come to them either. Now, the point that you raised earlier about the different tiers and stuff, you do get into that once the person's demeanor changes once they're in the cell. You could bring them in there, sergeant would say, how has the prisoner behaved? They say, oh, he's been fine, sergeant, no problem. Okay, but the sergeant will already have an idea. He's already admitted to me he's got mental health, but you've said he's compliant. What I'm going to do, I'm going to leave the cell door open. But remember, once and now, I mean, when I first joined, it was very much the old-fashioned fingerprint, ink, the roller ink, and, put your hands on things. Now you go into a police station, you just place your hands on the desk, and there's a light box, scans your hands, and yep, we know this person. And then the sergeant has a good idea, if the person's been in and out of the system, what to do and how to deal with that person. I've been in a situation where, arrested the person, brought the person in, sergeant has done exactly what I've said, and said, I said, oh, can I go now, Sarge? Because now I've got to go and write up my notes for what just happened, to, my statement to make the case. And he say, officer, I can't keep this individual here. They have this level of mental health. Police station is not the place of safety. This person is, high risk, and then go to hospital, which again now means that my job now as the officer is now changing, because I've just said to you, I've got to go upstairs and write my statement to, put to CPS to charge or do whatever it is they're going to do. Now I've been taken away from that, okay? And I'm now having to put the prisoner back in a van, drive across town to a hospital where I know if that hospital is busy, I'm going to end up sitting there all day. The amount of times that I should have finished at 11 o'clock at night, and 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm still sitting in the hospital, when I should have gone home 8 hours ago. I lost count. Again, I'm over the time that I should be there. The morning shift who are coming in to replace the night shift, they don't want to deal with it because they know they're going to get stuck there.
Right.
You see what I mean? So there's a lot of politics that goes on, but people don't see that unless you're on the inside,
But I think you made, I'm going to get right into the nitty gritty here now, Adrian. All I'm hearing is, keyword you said was discretion.
Yes.
That's to me, who works in mental health, who has time and time again seen people's care plan change based on people's discretion interpretation, understanding,
mhm,
feelings.
mhm,
And I, many a times on a multidisciplinary team, I've had to raise the question,
mm,
what would be the best decision if we take out our own personal desires, wants, whether it to be to go home, whether it be caseload, whether it be, I've got a repetition of cases, because this is what happens in healthcare.
yes,
I'm carrying 5 clients in a list of 20 that are high priority and has high needs, or utilizes multiple of services. So if someone has gone through this, has been arrested, gone through the police process or whatever, then it comes into the national health system, it comes into a health organization, and we too have to make a triage. So where I sat as triage for every child in the borough of, I'd say, was it Merton, a child that is being flagged as needing mental health, whether it be through the police system, social services, education, or self-referral through the healthcare system, all have to have this intake, so-called assessment,
yes,
then brought to disciplinary team, then discussed a care plan, then assigned a care worker or a key worker or a therapist or a clinician, and that would start the core assessment. The core assessment is where we gather as much information about an individual before they're even seen by a clinician that is going to be their long-term clinician. So here we have Robbie or Susan that's been arrested on a Friday night for drunk and disorderly. Teenagers out on the street on Friday night, was too lippy, got arrested, out of the group, one of them suffering from mental illness, doesn't present as a mental illness. They're charged, they're held in custody overnight to appear for court because they've done criminal damage. They go in court Monday morning. Meanwhile, Tommy within the group is autistic. He's showing bravado. He ain't listening. He's not complying to what the requests of the police are. Suddenly his charges have gone up. Because he's now hit a police officer. Now, on Monday morning, I'm now getting, because that child, if you're committing suicide in fear of exclusion or criminal activity, jumps our list to becoming a priority, must be seen in 24 hours.
right,
Of some kind, whether it be by myself or someone needs to go out and go to either the hospital, if sectioned, social services, gather information, do an initial core assessment. But the core assessment is, I would say, it takes probably about 3 sessions, one with the family, one with the child, one with gathering information, 2 to put a report together, to then present it to the multidisciplinary team, to then decide what his care plan. Meanwhile, this child has been, under the Mental Health Act, restrained, medicated, detained, either sectioned under a temporary Mental Health Act, and we're gonna, or sent back home, or gone back home and parents say, I've had enough. Social service step in. We've now got a child in care, in emergency care, and due to see court. This child is now, his life, or the care, or the so-called, we've been called on a call, has turned into a whole heap of a bit of a mess, because suddenly we've got a child that wasn't able to be identified, or we've got a young adult that hasn't been identified as having a learning disability or special needs or mental health. You're in the hospital all hours of the evening. You have to make a discretion. You have to use your discretion. The question is it fair, or is it, in your opinion? I have a concern about discretion, because then you as an individual who doesn't have mental health training is making a decision based on your discretion, whether that person is going to be held in police custody or at the police or at a hospital, or what is the outcome? Where is the parents where are the carers being, or the next of kin being called in to provide more information, because now you're working in the dark with a criminal case, and then I'm being passed a criminal case that I now have to apply care to. This is where there is it can be detrimental to any individual. And I think this leans very much in the area of when we've got misdiagnoses, inappropriate imprisonment, section of the Mental Health Act, based on someone's discretion.
Yes.
section 136.
136, yeah.
136, and we are faced with a situation whereby, in my experience of working in the mental health as well as social services and for National Health Service, right up to being a healthcare consultant for mental health, Section 1 abusers, the reality is that no case is the same. No,
that's the thing.
Person's mental health is the same. So when you say discretion, sounds quite reasonable with what you described.
Yes.
We know that the knock-on effect is calling for the training, is calling for partnership work, is calling for, this is not a police officer's area of expertise.
Yes. Yes.
In your opinion, what would you suggest, or what would you, because you remember, when we're in a situation, we don't always use rationale.
That's right.
And that is where discretion goes out the window, because you've left me a left hook on my chin. I'm now looking at you saying, you've got to give me a black eye. I'm now having to use my discretion, whether it's mental, it's not mental health. Yes. You're just out of order.
Yes.
You've got to go get locked up.
Yes.
Give me some understanding.
Yeah, that does happen a lot. Like you say, you turn up to a situation and, punches and kicking and everything like that, weapons and all the rest of it. You're more concerned about your safety, your colleagues' safety, and first and foremost, members of the public. Also, your actions. It wasn't so bad then when I joined, but now in this new advent of the camera phone, you have to be so professional. Every day we're seeing the videos of, oh, this officer's too heavy-handed, or they restrained the person too hard and stuff. All of those things, I will say now, must be running through officers' minds when they attend these different scenes. But one of the things that I know that they do now, they do it here where I live in Suffolk, is they have, I think you mentioned it before, like a triage officer.
Right.
And that officer is a mental health trained individual. And they ride around with the police in the back of the car. And when they get these calls, if somebody specifies, oh, I think there's mental health involved, those officers or this individual will be deployed with the police. The trouble is, like here in Suffolk, I know that there is 2 officers. Okay. Now you're talking about an area where there's, I don't know off the top of my head, 100,000 people to police. So therefore, how is 2 officers going to manage that whole area? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
That don't make no sense.
Right. So
it makes sense what you're saying, but
yeah, you see what I'm trying to say. So Officer A goes to a call, yes, mental health, to deal with that. Officer B goes to another call, mental health, deal with that. But a third call comes in, where's mental health? There's no one to go. So the buck stops with the officers again. And what then tends to happen is the officer then gets demoralized, really. So when you've got pressure from upstairs, major incident has happened somewhere else, need you back here now, right? Okay, 136, and go to the hospital, and you try to get rid of the person as quickly as you can, because you don't want it to be your responsibility. Yeah, right. If the police station is not a place of safety and the hospital is, when you get there, then you hand the person over, as I said earlier. Right. Equally, from the hospital staff side of things, they're rushed off their feet. So they look at you and think, well, this officer seems all right. Can you hold on? We're busy. So what you now have is NHS staff dictating to you as the police officer what you should be doing. Yeah. And whilst they're dictating to you, the sergeant's screaming at you down the radio, we need the car back. We got a major incident. we got officers here waiting and we need the car. It's just, I really don't know what to tell you. And again, I keep going back to the point of saying what I'm telling you with my experience is from 2004 up until very late in 2009 when I eventually left. So I know a lot has changed since then till now, and I would like to think one, the service in relation to mental health has improved, and also the training has improved, but I can't verify that. Coupled with that, I know with young people, especially the kids, the cannabis that they are smoking also, that was starting to become more prevalent, more to the time when I got to the end of my service, where they were starting to link heavy cannabis use with psychosis. And it was not uncommon to, you know, see an 18-year-old just really puffed up, really over aggressive. And I think those are some of the points that you're making as well, where these young people are, you know, they're just held, and because of the way that they're behaving, they're giving the perception of having mental health, because there's no rationale with them. You know, you got 4 or 5 burly police officers telling you, right, you're under arrest, and you know, a little skinny 18-year-old wants to fight all of you. You know, something not right. So you know what?
They will try.
Right. Okay. And again, you know, we all know the stories with the police, the Metropolitan Police in particular, in the early years. You know, in particular with young black boys, as we know, those boys were often placed under mental health, because once you go down that road, the rest of your life is severely affected, because the first thing they go, oh, you've got mental health, I need to treat you with kid gloves, or you can't come in here, and all the other bits that go with it. So it's very difficult.
And so Adrian, you hit that, just so you know, cannabis is legal in Canada.
Yes.
I have my own opinion, and if I was speaking as a therapist in the UK, I seen, you know, whether it's the chemicals that is being used in cannabis, back in the day when I was in the UK, which was only like 6 years ago, but when I was in frontline, depression and is high. You know? There's a lot of correlations, but and I'm working in a very predominantly affluent area. We're talking about Wimbledon, Richmond. We're talking about Wandsworth, Tooting. We're talking about certain parts of Merton. Wimbledon is one of the most affluent areas in London. Richmond Park, all of those areas. So it's not the stereotypical. I want to move away, that we're not talking about the stereotypical kid, you know, dropout, smoking cannabis. We're talking about the everyday kid that's smoking cannabis, that is having mental health side effects to not being able to manage or tolerate, or an intolerance towards the side effects of what cannabis actually is. And it's not for everybody, we know that. However, we come back to yet again what sounds like to me a need for services, a need to have processes and protocols in place to support those calls, because it's not been the first time I've heard you speak of, I've had to be a debt consolidating advisor, I've had to be a marriage counsellor, I've had to be a mediator between parent and child, just so that the child is not removed from the house, that this is not a criminal situation, this is a civil matter, this is about you and your landlord, or XYZ, whatever. But specifically on mental health, and I'm looking at my notes that I wrote down, because I keep coming back to, we can't leave it to discretion. In Canada, I work quite in depth with Halton Regional Police. And there is a lot of work that's being done to look at what services and support there is and how partnerships within the community, they recognise that within the Black community, there is a lack of, Black and people of colour community, there's a lack of trust within the police force because of the history in which we've had.
Yeah.
We know George Floyd last year shook up the world with regards to policing. In Canada, there's been a lot of attention being made towards improving the relationship, improving systems and processes. And I've been very much a part of that. But I think we come up against a brick wall all the time. And it comes back to open about their ability to manage cases, police officers being open, and police sergeants and departments being open enough to say, we're at breaking point, we need the resources and the foundation, whether it's funding, whether it's training, whether it's a secure partnership. It's no good just saying, oh, we'll refer to that agency because we know that agency. They need, in my opinion, there needs to be a process in which this is the procedure. Someone comes here, this is what happens, this is the care pathway. And as much as we would like to believe it's all in hand, it's not.
No, I agree totally. I agree.
Because time and time again, we know that I have people that are Section on the Mental Health Act that have no reason to be.
Yes, yes.
And it comes back to you as back to the police force.
Yes, it does.
Who make that decision based on discretion that you are going to be detained under this Criminal Act or the Mental Health Act.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I would say in particular with the 136 and detention is that once the officer makes that decision, goes through the process by, detaining them and taking them to the hospital and handing them over to, a practitioner, as it were, the officer's job there is finished.
Right.
So it is a very grey area because it's easy to blame the police to say, oh, well, the police detained him or her under 136. But like I said, which I always use the instance with, gentlemen walking down the street naked. Yeah. How else would you categorize that? If there's no children around, then you can't say that he's a sex offender, or he's trying to incite children, Yeah,
we're getting back into the obvious signs of mental health.
Yes.
We're talking about, we know within our community that, and multiple times we've seen it, how people have been detained or treated or restrained based on fear, and mental health brings fear.
Yes.
And if you're a police officer that doesn't have the expertise or training, you won't know what mental health looks like.
Yes.
You're only dealing with the overt mental health.
Yes.
You're not dealing with the fact that this person hasn't given me any eye contact.
Yes.
This person is vacant.
Yes.
This person is talking to me, but talking to somebody else. Like, it's only overt demonstrations of mental health that we're talking about. I'm talking about the everyday mental health, the bipolar, the personality disorder, the fear of suicide, suicidal ideation. We're talking about the everyday person and their experiencing of their mental health. So somewhere within that that process, based on a decision that a police officer's made, is then sectioned under the Mental Health Act, then allows a hell of a long time before an assessment can be made and a correction to be changed, because now that person hasn't been known, they've got a criminal record, they've detained under the Mental Health Act, they've been sectioned, they've been drugged, they're not functioning, they probably lost their job, mortgage has to be paid, children are in social services, and families being broken down based on a discretion. And I'm not looking to throw the police under the bus.
No, yeah, of course it is.
We're flagging the importance of their need of a partnership with mental health services or better training. We're closing up here. What are the last points that you want to make? And I'd like to end this series with some tips or some advice with regards to how we can move forward. And being a Black man yourself, we know what the statistics are. You have had to serve we know you know the experience of protect and serve the public. I want to empathize with the police force for the position that they're in.
Yeah.
But we're dealing with serving the public, and the public need has to be paramount. And so it's my job to ask, tell me what the police force needs to avoid this from happening, because this is ruining people's lives. This is having a damning effect on individuals. And only you as an ex-cop can share that, because you're not carrying the badge. And I understand the challenges that is.
Yeah, I would say the first thing is transparency. The police need to be more open with what it is that they're doing and how they do it. The second fundamental thing is resources, and I use that word resources very broadly because resources come in all different shapes and forms. It's very easy to just chuck money at the situation, but if the money's misappropriated and you go and buy a fleet of new vehicles, but yet your officers don't have no training with mental health, then you defeat the object. Like I said to you before, I can now tell you, schizophrenia, bipolar, and so on and so on and so on and so forth, because I now, being away from the police, have a good understanding of those terms, phrases, and terminologies, and what those diagnoses mean.
Right.
When I was wearing the uniform, I only had one phrase, and that one phrase is mental health, which encompasses everything. I didn't know the differences. So you made a point a while ago about eye contact and things like that. For me, no eye contact means you're suspicious. So you're hiding something.
Right.
You see what I'm trying to say? So the mind is geared that way. But again, when police officers are taught to drive, they're taught to use of force, how to defend themselves, how to restrain people. How much of the mental health aspect are you going to teach, any given police officer? Because there isn't enough hours in the day for the officer to deliver all of those services. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? And I think we need to get to a point where something has to be done where the pressure can be alleviated from the officer, so he can get on with the job in hand. It's very difficult, Nikola, to say what could be done. I think it's a rolling thing. What I would say from my own experience is that I personally tried to deal with all situations with as much humanity as I possibly could. Maybe you can look upon that as being soft, insofar as that I know what it's like to be on the wrong side of a police officer, being a Black man. Before I joined the police, I like my fast cars, loud music, and all the other bits that go with it. And I was forever being stopped and searched, standing up on the side of the road, police rifling through my pockets and so on and so forth. So I know what it's like. So when I now adopt the role of police officer and I'm now serving the public, I'm going to treat you with the utmost respect, because the spotlight is on myself. You've got to remember, as a Black officer, I've got lots to worry about. Okay, I'm being heavily scrutinized by the Black community. Oh, you're a traitor. You're a sellout. Okay. Equally, my white counterparts are doing their effort best to trip me up
Right.
within the job. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So you've got all of those things going on. You know, I'm trying to go for a promotion, but the sergeant's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder. You know, I can't do anything right for this sergeant. Any little thing, you know, he's on my back. All of the mundane jobs. Oh, can you go to this place and pick up this evidence? Okay, I'll go. I'll take a car. Oh no, get on the train, because remember I was British Transport Police. Get on the train. So you start to become bogged down with
Demoralized?
yes, you become demoralized. That then reflects upon how you do your job. Equally, you have officers who are out there who are just gung-ho. I'm a police officer, you know, and when I say stop, you stop. So that individual you're talking about who's not making eye contact, you know, or doesn't comply straight away with the officer's commands because they're subdued with whatever they've got going on within,
Right.
likely to find themselves face down on the pavement with their hands behind their back, when what they really need is somebody to talk to them and get them in a zone where they could be understood and heard. And that's the difficult bit. Now, the bit we ain't really touched on, although we've talked about it, is the National Health Service. Every day here in England, there's a punchline. Oh, the NHS is at breaking point. The NHS is at breaking point. That was before we had COVID-19. So if you factor in everything that we've spoken about tonight with COVID-19, how does that compute in reality? Okay, so you've got to imagine now, police officers now, they're wearing their mask as well. Same gentleman's in the street, butt naked. You detain him, you now take him to the nearest hospital. They're telling you that hospitals are at breaking point and they're stretched.
Right.
Do they have the capacity in the hospital to accept this individual that you're bringing to them?
Oh boy, right.
You may find that, oh, sorry, we're full. This hospital now is now a COVID hospital. So you'll have to go to the next hospital. Oh, well, this hospital's on my beat, but nobody told me in the briefing this morning that, oh, our local hospital's a COVID hospital. Nobody told me that.
Right.
Okay. So I get on the radio. Oh, Sergeant, oh, they've told me I can't take the person there. Well, think on your feet, then you'll have to do something. Well, what do you want me to do?
Discretion.
Discretion. Now,
Discretion.
do I release this person, bearing in mind they committed an offence, a criminal offence? Do I release that person because the hospital's full? If I do that, I lose my job.
Right.
So the officer or officers have so much pressure applied to them that no wonder they're at breaking point. We have, I don't know if you're aware, but we have part of Boris Johnson's election manifesto,
Right.
was to have 20,000 new police officers, in particular in London, in the Met,
Right.
you know, rolled out over a 5-year period.
Right.
But you're getting these officers in and you're training them, but you've got officers at the end of their 30-year service who are falling away. So, you know, the 20,000 that you're employing is only replacing the 20,000 that are leaving, not forgetting officers like myself who did 5 or 6 years and got to that point and said, you know what, that's it, that's enough for me. And I hasten to add, just before you go, Black officers in particular, like myself,
Right.
get to that point because I've got my own outside life going on. I'm getting older. I'm looking at new white officers coming into the service and accelerating past me at lightning speed.
Right.
I can't understand why. Being demoralized again.
Right.
So there's all of these factors, and then they put out these papers. Oh, why do Black and ethnic minority officers only last 5 years? Well, if you're like myself, I joined when I was 30 years old.
Right.
So I was expecting by the time I was 35 that I would be a sergeant, at least looking to make inspector.
Right.
But at 35 years old, I was still walking the beat around Liverpool Street, you know, directing traffic. Oh, excuse me, officer, where is this? Oh, turn left here, madam, and go up the road and you'll see it on the right-hand side.
Right.
So again, you know, the pressure that is placed upon the officer, you know, black or white, but you know, in my experience, I felt differently about it. And to cap it off, how you see your colleagues treat even your fellow person of color,
right,
in your presence, because sometimes they forget that you're there.
right.
All of those things have an impact.
Well,
Oh, sorry, I was going to say the last thing before you come in. When I joined, things, you know, there were a lot of benefits of being a police officer.
sure.
That changed when the London bombings took place back in 2005. And I think this is a key point as well to remember, maybe for another discussion.
Sure.
But all funds and everything else that go with it got diverted towards terrorism.
That's right.
So if you were like me, Bobby on the beat, as we're called, the last pair of police boots that I wore, I went out and bought myself because there wasn't the budget to, you know, you go to the stock room, hey, Gov, can I get a pair of size 9s? We ain't got none, we're waiting on an order, ain't come yet. 9 months and no boots. Turn up on a night shift. Where's the van? Oh, early turn, wrote it off. No vehicle. I remember getting into some trouble with my sergeant because he was insisting I go somewhere. And I said, Sergeant, there is no vehicle.
Right.
Well, what do you want me to do about it? I said, well, you know, I was at that point in my career, almost at the end, where I said, well, what do you want me to do? Get on horseback? And that didn't go down too well, as you can imagine. So that's how it gets you, you know? So yeah.
It doesn't sound pretty. You know, for
No.
the first time, I'm hearing an account from a police officer who is an ex-police officer that happens to be Black and has happened to. I remember the days of the London bombings and how everything, your stop and search turned into a terrorism. I'm stopping you for terrorism. You know, everything turned and everything's focus was on that. But to hear that our national police service doesn't have enough funds for boots, doesn't have, you know, we need to put in resources. We recognize that there is a need and yet we're still waiting. It calls for an overhaul. It calls for a real good look at how policing is really managed, performed, and how do we get rid of, how do we clean up the police force from the officers that don't go by the book, that make decisions that don't fit for their own good.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about using your discretion, if someone is being held at a police station, the sergeant or whoever made that decision has to be held accountable. There can only be so much disciplinaries that we can have. I do know through working with Halton Regional Police, they're very proactive with regards to policing in Halton. And just to have stepped out among beyond their other department, what does it say, neighbouring regions. They've been quite proactive in reaching out to the community, making a change and seeing what can be done with regards to race relations in the community, with regards to supporting. We have a huge South Asian community where I live, and there has been since 2020 many events whereby they've been targeted, and I think there's an increase since COVID for people from the Asian population. So, but it comes back to it. It comes back time and time again that if it's transparency, resources, and training, we need to call for it now, because now we're in a place of reform and we don't have to duplicate the system. Yeah. Some other country in this world must be doing it right. And let's not, I know we could talk about America, but that's a whole show in itself.
Yes.
And I know you and I have spoken quite briefly on it, and we just don't have the time for it today. But that in itself, I think policing in the States is a debate in itself, but we need to look at how we partner, how quality assurances really steps in. And this is where I am proactive in saying we need to provide even mental health support for police officers. We need to provide a systematic process where what happens when you get that call? Who do you call to offer relief so that you can do your job and that person gets the appropriate necessary assessments that is needed before being sectioned under the section of the Mental Health Act?
Yes, yes. Well, you see, even like you say that, I think from my knowledge, where I grew up in London, I grew up in Hackney, and there were a number of mental health institutions, dotted around the place at the time. One of which I think is still there actually. I believe it's the old Hackney Hospital, just off Homerton Street now.
Homerton Hospital. The new site, Homerton Hospital, is the main hub for mental health as well. The old site has become an institution.
Yes, yes.
But people still turning up to Halton Hospital for support.
Yes, yes, yes. I remember, as a youngster, people were just like in and out, in and out, in and out. But I think they need to go back to that, where there is a designated place for people to have treatment and have properly trained staff there that are ready to receive people, because without that, you're going to get the situation like what you described, where somebody who shouldn't necessarily be arrested and detained is being arrested and detained overnight, 2 nights. If you get nicked on a Friday,
you're in for the weekend.
That's it. You're going court on Monday.
That's right.
You see what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And because again, the officers need, and for me, again, like even doing this talk with you, I walk a very fine line. I'm all for the police, but I'm also all for exposing, what needs to be exposed, because there is a lot of failings.
Well, sorry to cut you. You've done a great job, because as much as if it's any comfort, you haven't played a part of exposing anything that is needed to be said. Everything you have provided, the information you provided today, has been professional, has been measured, and in some ways maybe measured maybe too much. But I just want to say to you, you have given us a good insight about what it is to be a police officer dealing with mental health on the beat.
Yes.
We've overrun our time today. Adrian, I could speak to you forever.
Yeah, I'm sure we could. Yeah.
I think there's a book that needs to be written, A Day in the Life of Intelligence Service Investigations.
Well, I'll let you into a little secret. I've started the front cover of something I'm working on, but probably won't get to the end of it till probably this time next year. But that's something that's going to be in the pipeline, because I think it's important that you can Google every ex-police officer's got a book, but I'm sure mine will be different, because I'm looking at, you know, from a different perspective, you know.
That's right. That's right.
And trying to be as upfront and overt with it as possible. Because one of the things, just before we go, people often say to me, "Oh, you know, somebody told me you were a police officer. You're so young. Why did you leave?"
Right.
And the amount of times that I've regurgitated that story, I've lost count. You know.
But we need to not let that happen. The police recognise that we need more diversity within the police force. The question is, what is the underlying problems that make our police officers leave the police force? We need, as in we as public service, you know, practitioners, whether police force, mental health, you know, I myself, frontlines, has worked in the NHS and been frontline and know what burnout is like. I must stress to you that it's everywhere. The experience that you feel is in every different sector, and I think that's
of course,
you know. But when I'm telling you that when I worked for Dennis Hill Unit at Bethlem Royal Hospital in South East London, in Surrey, sorry. A lot of the clients that I saw for psychotherapeutic treatment assessments, when you hear their true story, yeah, they got diagnosis, yeah, they may be presenting some behavior, but when you read the story, when you hear the story, these people should have only been in prison for like 1 year, petty theft.
Yes.
You know, stole a car, 5 years.
Yes.
They've been sectioned for 10, 20 years of their life.
Yes.
And the longer they're in there is the more mentally ill they're becoming. We are healing them, but the doses change. They become more subdued. Yeah. They're dealing with more. They're not seeing hope. Their desire to thrive is less. And we have to bring that back. And so the detriment to the process from arrest to being left then to being released is something so different. So I just want to say to you, it is a call for action. We need to do something about it. And I just want to say to you, thank you for joining me, airing some of
thank you for having me.
And everything you've done today. I really appreciate it. And I think we need to bring in maybe a mentor-mentee process, which we're trying to work on. Some colleagues of mine are working on providing police officers to be mentors to new recruits. What do you think about that, just to close?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, for myself, I don't actually participate now. I've been gone from the police, where 12 years now I've left, but I keep myself abreast of changes in the law. You know, I run the radio station with the Crime Lab show that I do. I'm you know, doing this private investigation company now as my source of income. So I've still got claws in there, because after all 20 plus years now, it has become a career for me. But I think I could deliver expertise and also listening to the new officers, because the problems that I faced, you know, almost 20 years ago are going to be different from what new officers going in tomorrow morning are going to face, for argument's sake. I'll
tell you what, sorry to cut you, I'll tell you what, you're not right, you're not, police officers are crying out for the same thing that you're describing, which is why I'm having a discussion with you. There is a need.
Yeah, you know, because again, 20 years ago, knife crime wasn't what it is now. I only ever had 2 instances where knives were visible to me when I attended a scene. Now, you know, you stop someone, I've searched hundreds of people and found knives and taken them off them and they were arrested, that's fine. But, you know, I've had 1 or 2 occasions where knives were shown where you think, oh, this could go wrong. But now, you know, they call them these zombie knives, you know, 12, you know, 15 inches long, like they're like swords, and these kids are walking around with them willy-nilly, and their argument is, oh, I need to protect myself, that gang across the road, they want to do me harm. Those are the things that officers are seeing now, and I didn't see. So I think, you know, trying to give them the impetus to go forward and to stay on the job is something that it would be a good idea for sure, to give them the confidence to go forward, you know.
Sure. And this is what brings in the company that I run, Act On It Therapies. We're here to reach out to organisations, frontline staff, to offer them some form of support during COVID. We understand that the need that you are facing, a multitude of different things in your everyday life, doing your job. So for frontline officers and for frontline National Health staff, Act On It Therapies wants to use the month of February basically to provide them with free consultation or complimentary consultation for a check-in between 15 to 30 minutes, one-off session for to meet with a clinician and just to talk. We feel that it's, as an organisation, we feel that there is a need to provide police officers, nurses, frontline staff with the support that is needed, that is separate from work. It is a confidential service. It is a private agreement that is outside of your workforce, that is not part of the employment assistance program, but I think it very much needs to be a part of an independent body that sits within public services, that provides this consultative support for police officers and frontline staff, especially now during COVID and after, because the reform is going to have to take some change management processes. And staff who work at the front line, at the hospitals, mental health, are going to need the proper supervision and support to do their job. And so Act On It Therapies can be contacted on 905 805 3884. That's in Canada. So for all those that also need that help, we do virtually as well. So I just wanted to really thank Adrian. Adrian, you do great work. You are giving back to the community. You are a beacon and a shining example. The sad part of this story is that we have lost you in the serve and protect role, and we need you.
Well, I'm still here. I mean, like you say, with what you're suggesting there, it's a good idea, and that's the sort of thing that I'm looking to get involved with also. So with your leadership, you know, I'm happy to come on board and get involved and use my expertise wherever I can. So I think it's a good thing. So
we'll be glad to have you. And to all those that are watching today, Adrian, what's your contact number if anybody wanted to reach out to you again and discuss this in a bit more detail? How could we contact you?
Yeah, you can get me via Facebook, which is, as it says here on the screen, Intelligence Service Investigations. Or you can send me an email, which I'll say it slowly because it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's intelligent.info@gmail.com. And you can also look at my website, which is www.intelligenceserviceinvestigations.co.uk.
And if anybody didn't get that information, if you want to direct message me, please do so. It's on Act On It Facebook, or you can do me a direct email on info@actonittherapies.com. You have my number. I'd like to thank Adrian Ashby, an ex-police officer that has really dedicated his time this evening to share with us his experience in the police force, his understanding of what the training, his experience of training, and the importance of ensuring that we do an overhaul in our public service, especially the police force, that looks at transparency, officers being transparent about their everyday issues that they face, the lack of resources or the resources that need to be enhanced to meet the the current day needs of policing and training.
Yes.
We always say we need to invest in ourselves. The police force need to invest in their officers if we want them to do a good job. And if we want to retain good officers like Adrian Ashby, we need to put the money where it's needed. Sure. So Adrian Ashby, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Nikola. Thank you.
Welcome to Talk On It. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.